Hey guys, Scott here. I finally have played enough of Vecna to get some decent first impressions on him, and honestly, I think they are pretty good. This is probably the killer I have the least amount of suggestions for in terms of balancing out of all PTBs they've released in a very long time. So I think he's mostly at a pretty good spot, and it's going to be kind of hard to tell because one of his main issues is he has a very, very high skill ceiling. His skill floor is not super high, but his skill ceiling is damn near infinite. It's like right under Springtrap in terms of theoretical tool-assisted orbitals and stuff like that. Because technically, if you are utterly perfect with your aim, this killer has a power that is completely unavoidable. If you spawn this power directly in the center of a survivor's pill hitbox, they cannot dodge it. They can't get to the edge of the circle quick enough. The problem is, obviously, no one can do that. No one can hit a perfect exact circle directly on top of the survivor every time. It's impossible. So my point is, though, his skill ceiling is extremely high, and because of that, it's kind of hard to tell how strong he's going to be because no one is nearly good enough at him yet to get to that level, and no one ever will be perfect all the time. So it is difficult to tell how strong he's going to be. Right now, if I had to assign a letter, I still think it's way too early. If I had to pick a letter, I'd say A tier. I think some people are overestimating him a little bit, and some people are underestimating him as well. People are saying that he's better in Nurse and Blight. I definitely do not agree at all. His main downside is his map control, despite having a movement ability, is surprisingly not very good at all. His chase is unbelievably high potential, but his actual map control is very limited by a very long cooldown, unless you run a specific add-on that reduces his cooldown quite a bit, but then also nerfs the AoE that comes out of the ground. And the problem is the time it takes to transition from just standing still to going to the upside down takes a few seconds. Then you start moving at like Wraith Windstorm movement speed. And then once you pop up, you stand still for a few seconds. Then you're slow after that. Basically, if someone is like 20 to 30 meters away from you and you use it to catch up, you end up actually like losing distance. The only purpose it has is to like get ahead of them and zone them away from an area you don't want them going, which, you know, is not useless or anything like that by no means. It's still a useful ability, but it's such a slow process that he has this very awkward distance where it's like not worth chasing a survivor with the upside down traversal, but it's also not worth chasing them because you're 110% killer just chasing a survivor running away in a straight line. Basically, his main counterplay is running away in a straight line. He is very, very susceptible to holding W, and that's why perks like Sprint Burst and Overcome completely shit on him. And I think a lot of people that are saying he's better than Nurse and Blight and stuff like that are not taking that into account. Maybe they didn't account for people, or they didn't encounter people that were running Sprint Burst and Overcome and stuff like that, but this killer is completely countered by Sprint Burst, so much so that if someone has Sprint Burst and you're in the upside down and you're just following them, you cannot do a single thing to them. They will not use their sprint burst until you pop out of the ground, at which point they're 40 meters away and you've accomplished nothing. Your power is now on cooldown for a while, and now you just have no map control again. So there are perks that heavily counter him in that kind of regard, and it's sort of like the Nurse counterplay where his chase is so theoretically strong that the thing that you do against him is just run away in a straight line to the other side of the map. And basically, when he hits you with a melee attack, you gain just enough distance to be in range of his vines to pop up out of the ground. So you have just enough distance to where he gets one attempt to hit you at absolutely max range before, if he misses that, you're gone. There's just no chance he's ever going to hit you again. You can go reset. So teams bringing a bunch of Sprint Burst, Overcome, and even Self-Care, because you can just reset over and over and over again. It doesn't matter. That is going to be the key to defeating Vecna. And I had played against basically the same four people for like 4 hours straight. So they started developing, techniques in order to counter me, and I could definitely see where the counterplay is. Now, where the counterplay is not is in chasing, because if I'm nailing all of my shots, there's almost nothing you can do about it. It's extremely, extremely strong, the potential of his power. But like I said, it demands basically perfection from the killer player, which, some matches, I hit most of my shots, and I readily won with like 5 gens left. Some matches, survivors were in my head, and they were dodging me a lot, and I actually just straight up lost the match. So it's very variable, very skill dependent on how good this killer can actually be. But like I said, his potential is extremely high. But realistically, how often are you going to get to that potential? Not super high. Like, takes his upside down movement where he has the ability to do an undergate attack by popping up in front of somebody. realistically, this should never hit an actual player. There's no scenario where the player doesn't have enough time to simply run in a straight line away from you wherever, you're popping up. Now, this might mean that you're zoning a survivor away from something, which I get, like I said, is the main point of using that undergate attack. You get ahead of them, cut them off, and then force them to turn back into a direction you didn't want to go. But realistically, you should never actually get a damaging health state on someone with this ever, with an exception. I noticed some of the players that were in my lobbies in the custom games, some of my viewers were from Europe, and because they had high ping, they had less time to react to me getting ahead of them. And so I would pop up and then they would run into me thinking that they still needed to get ahead of me because on their screen it hadn't registered that I had already started the power. But by then, when I pop up, they get hit. And they told me later in the post-game chat that they were well out of the circle, but they still got hit. So high ping makes it so you can actually hit the undergate attack. But other than that, no one is ever really going to realistically get hit by that thing. It's just not even really meant to hit players. This does make it so he's actually surprisingly weak at protecting hooks. He can't make any of the vines pop out under a hook whatsoever, so hook trading is not like as dangerous as it would be against like a pyramid head or something like that. It's very safe. He basically can just slap you and that's about it. So he does have a couple of key weaknesses that stop him from being absolutely god tier, but really most of it comes down to just the physical skill requirement to hitting every single one of your shots. It's just very high. So his main weakness, like I said, is the awkward distance where they're too far away, but not far away enough to justify using your power. So even in scenarios where you have like a 3-gen, you're going to have really smart teams pre-run. If you're in the upside down, they're just going to simply run away. And if you commit to chasing them, they're going to lead you. We're going to run in a straight line. They'll die in a corner on the other side of the map. And now you just have to waltz your 110 ass back to your 3-gen. It's going to take 30 seconds of just walking. So all of the matches I lost when going against these players were because they were very, very smart about maintaining their distance and just forcing me to just be right in that awkward area where it's not worth it to use my power, but it's also not worth it to keep chasing them. So I would just be in this really awkward in between, and I just couldn't get a hit on them. So that is going to be the main counterplay. Now, that's not exactly fun counterplay. So I don't know exactly how we're going to be doing this in terms of the fun of the killer to go against. Up until now, I've solely been talking about his strength. In terms of the fun to go against, I am actually a bit concerned because on the one hand, if you do have Vecna players that are just going crazy, just tried a bunch of crazy shots, and it's like a minefield. Every 2 seconds there's an explosion somewhere. You have an equal chance to dodge as he has to hit you. When it's that gameplay, I think it's pretty fun. And it's, like you're going Saving Private Ryan. It's just bullets, explosions everywhere. It can be pretty intense going for that type of gameplay. However, I did find that there was a playstyle that was extremely boring, and that was basically just zoning. You just zone people with it and wait for them to get into an animation lock and then just hit them when they're dropping a pallet, vaulting a window, because you can't miss if they're doing that. Because you're not slowed down so much, and honestly, there's such a minor cooldown, even if you do miss, the killer very heavily incentivizes a boring zoning play style where you just force people into corners and then just M1 them or something like that. So I'm not saying that there's no counterplay against it, but I will say this is one of those killers where it's more up to the killer to hit people than it's up to the survivor to dodge the attacks. Which, like I said, in a scenario where the killer absolutely has mastered the ability, I would imagine that's going to be very unpleasant to go against. But I don't think there's not going to be that many people that actually end up playing this killer. I think this is actually, despite a very strong opening, because, Stranger Things Vecna, in terms of the likeness and everything, it's amazing. They did that. They look straight up from the show. It's like damn near perfect. The voice acting is obviously not Jamie because he has a very distinct voice, but it's serviceable enough. It's fine. Aesthetically, everything is great. And I do think it's going to draw a lot of people to playing it for a couple of weeks. But then we're going to get to that scenario where people are finding out he's extremely hard to master. On controller, he's even harder to master. So we're going to have this scenario where he is too difficult to play for most people to get a reward out of it, in my opinion. So I do think within a month, this is going to be a very lightly played killer, despite being from a very popular IP. His pick rate is going to drop significantly due to the combination of hard to master and also probably awful for controller, where frankly, let's be real, most of the players actually are. So despite the fact that I like this killer and I have almost no suggestions in terms of what I would actually change about him, at least so far, I do think we're going to end up with a killer that a lot of people end up not playing because he's just too hard to master. So It's good for me. I like killers that are hard to master because it actually gives me something to master. It gives me a reason to keep playing the game. It's not like, Crossy where you play it for 5 minutes. You're like, okay, I got it. I'm bored now. This killer, reeks of skill and skill caps and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to continue to try to learn him, but I am a little worried about his future in terms of pick rate because I do think he's going to be very underpicked. Overall, though, very, very strong chase potential. His map control is his main weakness. Sprint burst, overcome, exhaustion perks are very, very good at countering him. Perks like, languid touch or genetic limits or anything that's going to give you an ability to stop their exhaustion is going to be, I feel, almost required on this killer because good teams are going to counter them with sprint burst and overcome so heavily that you almost need this. There's also an add-on, I think, that applies exhaustion. So again, still figuring a lot of stuff out. First impressions are, though, this is a very good killer. It's well designed. I don't have too many suggestions in terms of changing. I think he's probably going to settle around in A tier-ish region. Definitely not S tier, but I don't think he's weaker than that ever. It's just very hard to master the killer. And once people do, I think we'll see his actual true strength. But overall, this is the first time I can probably say I don't really have any suggestions in terms of changing. I think he's mostly kind of right where he needs to be, which is, again, I got to say props. Usually I got something to yap about in terms of what I would change, but I can't really think of anything right now. He's got a clear strength, a clear weakness with holding W and map control. And I guess we'll just take it from there. But that's it. Thanks for watching. Those are my first impressions. See you next time.